Hello, gathered friends. I'm Rora Nuva, and welcome to Bionicle Deep Dive, where we analyze the tropes, characters, and lore of LEGO Bionicle. And in this video, we're going to be counting down the top 12 Bionicle Kaiju. Bionicle has had plenty of bombastic giant monsters in its run, and here are my picks for the best beasts in the series. Let me know in the comments what your personal picks are for the best giant monsters in Bionicle. Let's dive right into it. At number 12, we have the cybernetic Botamagna dinosaurs. These giant reptiles were native creatures to the jungles of Botamagna that were modified by the great beings to be even more powerful, seeming to be their early steps into biomechanical life that they would perfect with the Matoran universe. These include large biomechanical sauropods and living creatures used as transport, as well as a 40-foot tall predator with an explosive laser targeting system replacing one eye, polished metal teeth, and circuitry along its tail. These creatures were intended to appear in the scrapped sequels to the Legend Reborn movie, and unfortunately, aside from a few background cameos in later comics and story serials, really didn't make any major canon appearances. Because of that, I'm putting them at the bottom of this list, though they were a really cool concept that I would have loved to see explored. At number 11, we have the Dweller in the Deep. This colossal fish monster resided in the waters directly beneath the great temple in Ga-Metru, Metru Nui, and was so rarely seen it was believed to be a myth. It is said that it was the only natural predator of the Tarakava and the great temple's squids. Its only known appearance came in the early Metru Nui arc, when Toa no Kama encountered it while searching the sea bottom for the Ga-Metru Great Disc. Its maw was so huge she mistook it for a cave, and found this disc wedged between two teeth she thought were stalagmites. As Nokama took the disc, the Dweller awoke and began to close its jaws around her, and chased her up to the surface. Nakama managed to escape by leaping from the water and getting the giant fish to follow her, sending it crashing into a squad of Vaki that began to fight it, before it returned to its home deep beneath the sea. Shame we never really see or hear of it again, because there's a lot of unanswered questions about it, like, how did it get there, and how did the Great Disc end up in its jaws? And is it connected to the other giant ancient sea rahi we see later in the series? The Dweller in the Deep gets a spot on this list for being such a cool and creepy creature, as well as having many interesting implied questions from having the Great Disc. But the fact that it really only appears once and is never really explored or expanded upon keeps it close to the bottom for me, since there's not really much to it. You'd think the Matoran would make a bigger deal about such a massive creature just chilling underneath their most significant spiritual site, hoarding powerful artifacts, but hey. At number 10, we have the Mountain of Zia. May seem strange to count a landmark as a giant creature, but I think those who know of it can all agree this peak is truly monstrous. The mountain is the central physical landmark on the island of Zia, home of Rudaka and her people, the Vortex. The mountain was a sentient rock, originally created by Makuta Mutran as a pet that he accidentally left behind on Zia in the early days of the Matoran universe. The rock was capable of sensing its surroundings and opening crevices within itself, allowing it to swallow living beings and add them to its mass. Over the course of millennia, it did just that, and eventually grew into a mountain. The ever-present danger it presented left the peaks of the mountain as the only remaining source of fresh air and nature on Zia, as the rest of the island became an environmental disaster following the intense industrialization and pollution from weapons factories. The mountain has a seemingly insatiable appetite, and will consume anything that attempts to climb it. Despite this, the people of Zia don't seem to mind and even go out of their way to try and climb it, despite knowing it wants to eat them. Guess that's why they're called the Vortex, huh? They used the mountain as a rite of passage. They came to believe anyone brave and skilled enough to climb it has shown they have what it takes in their world. So, young Vortex will travel up the mountains in pairs, male and female, and if they survive, they're given better jobs and higher social status. And if only one of them returns, that survivor will be given even higher praise and status, as it's clear that one had the ruthlessness and cunning to survive where the other could not. Such was the case with Rudaka, who betrayed her climbing partner in what she understood to be a deal with the mountain. She makes it to the top, and it gets an easy meal. The mountain is truly and utter horrifying, something straight out of an elder's nightmare. And with that, gets a spot on this list. And frankly, I was genuinely tempted to put it way higher, but I figure some of the actual animal beasts probably deserve a better spot on this list. At number 9, we have the Rahi Nui. One of the most dangerous creatures the Toa ever faced, the Rahi Nui was a terrifying amalgam of some of the most powerful Rahi species, and specifically was a combination of all the main Rahi the Toa Mata faced in 2001, except for the Manas. Described as being at least 3 times larger than a Toa at its base size, the Rahi Nui had the head and horns of a Kanera bull, the punching arms of the aquatic Tarakava, the body and hind legs of a Mwaka tiger, if you could call those treads legs, and the insect wings of a Nui Rama, and the scorpion tail of a Nui Jaga. The Rahi Nui was specifically bred to hunt and kill Toa, seeing them as its prey. Vakama saw a vision of Kreka and Nidiki when he first encountered the beast, which made him realize it served the Dark Hunters as a tracking beast to defeat Toa. While never explicitly confirmed, the Rahi Nui may have worked alongside the Dark Hunters, including Eliminator, to kill the Toa Mangai as they left Metru Nui on their missions, particularly since it was found in the tunnels outside the city. It also battled both the Toa Metru and the Toa Nuva, and while both teams managed to prevail, the beast brought both teams to some of their closest calls with death. Particularly against the Metru, the Rahi Nui managed to sting Nokama so hard in the back while she was saving Anawa from a fall, both horribly wounding and poisoning her, and she would have died if she wasn't given a cure by the Karzani plant. In addition to its formidable hybrid body, the Rahi Nui had other dangerous abilities, such as the powers of the 8 standard Kanoka discs, and showcased the ability to teleport, shrink, grow, regenerate, and freeze, though it appeared to lose these powers after its defeat by the Metru. And most deadly of all to Toa, the Rahi Nui had the ability to absorb elemental energy, meaning any attack from a Toa would be useless, and even make the Rahi Nui larger and stronger. Though, that ability to absorb elemental energy is actually what caused its first defeat by the Toa Metru, when Nuju noticed that while it gained size when it absorbed elemental energy, it didn't increase in weight, meaning it became less dense every time it grew. Using this, he and Vakama managed to make it grow so much it lost its density and its molecules drifted apart. You'd think that would be enough to kill it, right? But no, because somehow it managed to pull itself together 1,000 years later to menace the Toa Nuva, who, with Vakama, managed to trick it into burying its horns into a cave wall while they escape. This creature was absolutely terrifying and hugely impactful, being responsible for major character decisions and bringing our heroes some of their toughest battles yet. At number 8, we have the Ancient Sea Behemoth. An enormous 200-foot-long creature, the Ancient Sea Behemoth was an organic creature native to Aqua Magna that resembled a cross between a whale and the clawed slime worms in Onuwahi. The behemoth was incredibly ancient, far older than the Matoran universe, and speculated to have lived in a time when it was dwarfed by its fellow creatures. It first appeared in the Mari Nui arc, when Kongu used his Mask of Summoning to call on nearby animals for aid. The behemoth awoke to answer his call and erupted from the sea floor beneath them, sending both the Toa and their foes flying in its wake. Later on, the behemoth did battle with the 300-foot-long Venom Eel, before later making an alliance with both it and Gadunka to attack the Toa Mari for the Mask of Life. It was later defeated by the combined effort of Kongu and Holly, who stunned it with a rock slide. The Ancient Sea Behemoth doesn't actually have that much going for it as far as story significance, but at the very least, the effort was put into making it very atmospheric and give it gravitas, so I give it props for that. Its mere existence was a clue to the true nature of what life was like before and outside of the Matoran universe, which was really cool to see. At number 7, we have the first Sea Rahi. These were ancient Sea Rahi of enormous size and monstrous abilities that first appeared during Voyage of Fear, during the Tometru's journey from Metru Nui after the Great Cataclysm, in an attempt to find their new home, which would turn out to be Mata Nui. These creatures weren't one species, but rather a wide variety of ancient sea monsters, including giant octopi, huge razor-toothed lightning fish, tentacled whales, and very notably, several enormous sea serpents. The serpents in particular were insane, and I'm not entirely sure if some of their size descriptions were hyperbole or not, since they ranged from being described as 40 to 65 feet on the small end, to being close to as long as the Colosseum, to one even being described as approximately the length of Pometru. Given that Pometru is larger than Onumetru, I have a hard time believing it could possibly be contained in a tank in the archives, even if the archives extends beyond Onumetru itself, but hey, this is Bionicle, and crazier things have happened in its size scaling. But if this was an exaggeration, then these may well be the largest creatures in the Bionicle mythos by a literal country mile. These creatures made an appearance in the waters around Metru sometime between 4,000 and 1,000 years ago, and were captured and brought into an enormous aquatic sublevel in the Onumetru archives. Because they were believed to be some of the earliest Rahi ever created, Duma reluctantly granted permission for them to be studied outside of stasis for the purposes of Matoran science. However, to prevent panic, this study was kept top secret, even from Toa Likan. A 3-Matoran team of Wenua, Mavra, and Onipu were responsible for researching them, though after an escape attempt by one of the creatures proved they couldn't keep them under control, Duma ordered the project be terminated. Mavra, who became obsessed with the creatures, was horribly distraught, and that night escaped with the creatures, with them eventually taking refuge in the waterways in the cracks of the Great Barrier. Later on, when the Toametru left Metru in search of a new home, they passed through the Great Barrier and into the tunnels where the Rahi and Mavra were. Mavra mistakenly believed the Toa were there to capture him and his friends, and a battle erupted that provoked the creatures into a massive frenzy. Mavra was lost, and the creatures were trapped in the tunnels by the escaping Toa. At least one of the creatures made it to the waters on the island of Matanui, a great temple squid that once fought Gali in the cave entrance to the tunnels. One aspect of these creatures that makes them so interesting to me is the mystery of their origins. Due to the obvious parallels between them and the ancient sea behemoth, being the themes of being ancient when the MU was young, and giant sea creatures, and the fact that the sea behemoth was stated to have swam with other similar creatures in its time, as a kid, I speculated that these creatures were not true biomechanical Rahi, but rather that these were in fact sea creatures from Spheres Magna that found their way into the Matanui robot. While Greg Farsi did state that the earliest Rahi were created by the Great Beings, it is ambiguous as to whether he was specifically referring to the sea creatures Mavra was studying, or just Rahi in general. It may also be that they were created by the Great Beings who were influenced by the Behemoth and others like it. Either way, it's very interesting to think about. But no matter where they come from, these creatures definitely deserve a nice spot on this kaiju list, because who doesn't love terrifyingly huge giant sea monsters? At number 6, we have Gadunka, 2007's resident zooplankton kaiju. Gadunka was originally a very small aquatic creature living in the waters around the pit when it was mutated by the Mask of Life and grew to become a large, terrifying creature. Known for its distinct massive metallic jaws, wide squat body, and bioluminescent cranium, this creature was one of the most uniquely constructed sets in the series, becoming somewhat beloved by fans for how weird yet charming it was. And for some reason, they gave him a fucking gun. Originally only a threat to things less than an inch long, Gadunka went on to become a major player in the events of the Mari Nui arc. Gadunka's main instincts from when it was small, to eat and control territory, was still essentially the same. But after it got gigantic, the scale of those needs increased along with it. Gadunka sought to control a whole swath of the ocean floor, and would chomp anything that got in its way. Gadunka also sought the strange glowing rock that gave it its powers, the Mask of Life, and deliberately attempted to take it from both the Baraki and the Toamari. Huki battled the beast, purposely not using his mask in a sense of sportsmanship, though this backfired and Gadunka eventually overpowered him, and if it weren't for the help of his teammates, Huki may have been devoured. Gadunka later battled the other Mari and took the Ignika from Matoro, but Gadunka was cursed again by the mask, and shrunk back down to its original size, no longer a threat to anyone. Honestly, Gadunka is one of my faves. The only reason it's so low is because it's debatable, as if it counts as a kaiju. Certainly kaiju size compared to its original form, but overall it's only a little bit bigger than a Toa. Well, there's no doubt that this creature is definitely one of the most unique villains in Bionicle. At number 5, we have Fenrak and Kardas, Vizon's enormous spider mount that was later transformed into a powerful dragon by the Mask of Life. Fenrak was originally one of the large spiders native to Voyanui, before being mutated into an even larger form to serve as a guardian for the Mask of Life and the mount for Vizon. Fenrak's mouth was full of huge fangs and acidic saliva, and like most Bionicle spiders, he had 4 legs. Fenrak, like Vizon, was also given the power to absorb kinetic energy by the Mask of Life, meaning physical strikes against them only make them stronger. Fenrak and Vizon were defeated by the Toa-Nika and driven into the lava, but the curse of the Mask of Life meant that so long as they were its guardians, they were immortal and would come back stronger any time they were defeated. Fenrak then emerged from the lava reborn as the Kardas Dragon, a monstrous giant lizard with the power to breathe pure explosive energy from its mouth. The energy inside him builds up constantly and has to be expelled, otherwise Kardas himself would go boom. The energy it breathes is so powerful, it was able to match the combined elemental blasts from 4 of the Toa-Nika, though in the comics it's depicted as all 6. The energy beam stalemated, but because Kardas' reserves never ran out, the Toa became exhausted and lost the beam struggle. The Toa managed to win when Jaller hit Vizon and Kardas with a special Zamar sphere that froze them in place long enough for the Toa to take the mask from them. Kardas is also responsible for blasting the Mask of Life out of Mitoro's hands, allowing it to fly into the sea. Later, the dragon emerged onto the surface of Voyanui, where it fought the Tatarak, but was forced to retreat. It flew all the way to the island of Matanui, where it did battle with the Borak swarms and was injured. Gali later found the dragon while revisiting the surface and did her best to comfort it before moving on. Later, according to statements from Greg, the Kardas made its way down to Metronui, where it was captured by the Toamari. Fenrak and Kardas were absolutely monstrous and well deserving of a spot on this list. And a fun fact about them is that in set form, Kardas was a combiner model of Vizon and Fenrak, Axon, and Brutaka, and at the time of release was the largest official Bionicle set ever made, fitting for an energy-breathing kaiju like this. At number 4, we have the Zivon. The Zivon was a gigantic scorpion creature that resided in the Zone of Darkness, and was utilized by the Vizorak Horde as an ultimate weapon. However, its use came at a terrible cost to the Horde, for Vizorak were the Zivon's favorite meal. It only worked with them as a means to keep its food source safe, and would occasionally devour half the Horde as a victory celebration, making its use more of a Pyrrhic victory. Sidorak only ever considered bringing it out when he wanted to make certain his enemies would be dead no matter what. The Zivon stood 30 feet tall with massive claws and a stinger tail, and the ability to shoot Vizorak webbing. To call it, the Horde employed the powers of the Kagarak, the giant golden Vizorak spiders with the ability to open portals to the Zone of Darkness. The Zivon made its first and only appearance in Challenge of the Hordika, where Sidorak brought it out in hopes of crushing the Toa Hordika in one fell swoop. There, the Zivon did battle with the Tatarak and Kraka, who had allied themselves with the Toa. The battle was hard fought, and the two were almost evenly matched, but in the end, the Tatarak's superior strength allowed it to break the Zivon's stinger tail. In the end, all 3 were banished to the Zone of Darkness by a Kagarak, and the Zivon was never seen again. Another absolutely terrifying beast. You know it's bad when you start to feel bad for the Vizorak. At number 3 is the 300-foot-long mutant venom eel. This enormous serpent-like creature was originally a regular venom eel living in the oceans around Marinui during the quest for the Mask of Life. It was hiding in a cave when the Matoran Dekar entered the cave and tried to destroy the Mask of Life, which defended itself as it always did by creating a guardian. Reaching out with its power, it mutated the eel from its regular, several-foot-long form, growing it to 300 feet and unleashing it on the surrounding waters. The eel was still driven by its desires to hunt and survive, and now found itself large enough to eat almost anything. Part of what made the eel so cool to me was its early descriptions in City of the Lost. Particularly, on its first introduction, this creature inspired absolute terror in all that saw it, being described as death itself, changing the very nature of the water around it, sending all who could perceive the natural world around them into a terror. So chilling. It attacked Marinui, forcing the Matoran there to smash all their light zones, so the creature could no longer be drawn to the light and motion. It then attempted to destroy the cord connecting Marinui to Voyanui in an attempt to eat those it heard inside. Those happened to be the Toa Inika, who were then also transformed by the Ignika into the Toa Mari. The giant eel was beaten twice by Toa Mari Hyuki, both times with his mask of gravity. The first time, Hyuki increased its weight until it sank to the bottom and fell unconscious. The second time, Hyuki decreased its weight so that it was so light it would be carried up by a current, ultimately saving the creature from the destruction that would reign when Mari Nui was destroyed, along with the cord. At number 2, we have the Kanohi Dragon. The Kanohi Dragon was a powerful beast of ancient legend. A massive dragon, far larger than a Toa, this beast thrived on heat and breathed fire. Its name comes from its glittering scales that resemble Kanohi masks. Whether these are just replicas or actual masks of power is unknown. However, it is believed that the masks were used to lure Toa as a trap. As far as its set design, the Kanohi Dragon was actually a canonized mock created by Tyler Herbst and was one of the winners of the 2003 Rahi building contest that was included in the Rahi Beast book and given a role in the story. The Kanohi Dragon first appeared during the time of the League of Six Kingdoms, where it used Metronui as a hunting ground long before it became a crowded metropolis. The beast was defeated by Toa and sealed in an ice chamber in the Silver Sea around the city. It stayed there for millennia until about 4,000 years ago when it was freed by the Dark Hunters in an attempt to racketeer Metronui. The attempt failed, however, when Turagaduma instead summoned Toa Likan and 10 other Toa to save the city, making the dragon ultimately responsible for the formation of the legendary Toa Mangai. The dragon enmeshed itself in the great furnace to replenish its strength from the heat. The 11 heroes battled the beast for an entire month, during which much of Tamechu was wrecked and an unfortunate number of Matoran were killed. In the end, it was brought down by the Toa Mangai, particularly from the combined power of 4 Toa of Ice. Now, just take that in. It took 11 Toa a full month to defeat it, and they couldn't even kill it. Nidiki tried while it was frozen, but even then couldn't manage to pierce its hide. The battle was so terrible that when it was over, the Toa didn't even feel a sense of triumph, just exhausted relief. It's implied that Likan was mentally scarred from the battle, feeling paranoia of the beast's possible return and refusing to talk about the fight even millennia afterwards. In the end, they brought it to the island of Zia, Rudaka's homeland, who agreed to keep the creature away from other lands. Secretly, they began to test its powers to see if they could replicate it in their weapons production, though it's unknown what results came of this. Later on, the Zeans would release the Kanohi Dragon in an effort to stop the Tatarak, who had been teleported to their island, and the battle between the two managed to destroy much of the island city before they were subdued by the Toahaga. The Kanohi Dragon was an insanely powerful creature, and was responsible for uniting one of the most legendary Toa teams in history, giving it a very high spot on this list. And now, my pick for the number 1 kaiju in Bionicle is the Tatarak. When it comes to giant monsters in Bionicle, the Tatarak is the GOAT, having fought several members of this list with a few victories and no definitive defeats by other kaiju. The Tatarak was a fan-designed Rahi, and the grand prize winner of the 2003 Rahi building contest, created by Justin Lamb, otherwise known as Tad 10-0, and was even featured as in an official comic. As a species, the Tatarak was a pack predator, originally from the southern parts of the Matoran universe. Standing at 40 feet tall, the Tatarak is the largest land Rahi known to the Matoran universe. Tatarak possess incredible strength due to their size, capable of bringing down entire buildings in a single blow, and even ripping up Metronui's chutes and tossing them into the sea. The Tatarak were also very smart, having near Matoran level intelligence, and were capable of speaking and making long-term plans. They would roam the plains, eating what they could, and traveling from island to island, usually across land bridges that were present in the early MU. Eventually, the land bridges fell away, and the northernmost they got was the Kaz, where they were used as mounts for the Skakti in their endless civil wars. However, a dying Tatarak revealed that they actually had plans to rise up against the Skakti when the time was right. They were also present on Kitangu's home island, where they were also ridden by his species. The most well-known member of this species was the Tatarak of Metronui. While the species didn't normally travel that far north, this individual was actually teleported to the island city by Butaka as his idea of a joke. It somehow became buried beneath the archives, where it was awoken by the Tometru's battle with the Kraka, later emerging on the streets above, demanding the answer, before being sent back down again by Vakama, Matau, and Nokama. Weeks later, during the Vizorak invasion, Kraka brought it back to the surface, where they allied with her and the Tometru against the Vizorak horde. There, the Tatarak fought an epic battle with the Zivon. There were points where the Zivon's claws, stingers, and webbing seemed to get the best of it, but together with the help of Kraka and its own massive strength, the Tatarak managed to break the stinger of the Zivon, causing the Kagarak to attempt to banish it to the zone of darkness rather than watch the Zivon lose. Thanks to quick thinking from Kraka, both they and the Zivon got banished together, preventing the Zivon from roaming unchecked in Metronui. 1,000 years later, Brutaka would open a portal to the Zone of Darkness on Voyanui during his fight with Axon, and after the fight was over, the Dimensional Gate stayed open long enough for both Kraka and the Tatarak to escape. The big boy was back, and it was here to stay. There was a stretch of 2007 to 2008 where Greg just kept bringing the Tatarak back specifically for kaiju battles, and my boy went on an insane streak. It beat the Kardas dragon and sent it running from Voyanui, got teleported to Zia by Botor, where it threw hands with the Kanoi dragon, and even tore whole trunks out of the mountain. Second time in its life, it was teleported to a densely populated island city as a joke by an Order member, by the way. Helix should really look into that. Eventually got beaten by the Toahaga, with Bomanga using his mask of growth to put it in a headlock. But no shame in that. It was already weakened by the Kanoi dragon, and the Toahaga are already goats at dealing with Rahi. Greg even mentioned that he would have liked to have it face off against the Botamagna dinosaurs if the story continued. But so yeah, the Tatarak fought every other land kaiju on this list and came out on top or fought it to a draw. When you're the measuring stick against all giant monsters are measured, you know you're that guy. So, that's my list of the top 12 Bionicle Kaiju. Tell me in the comments what your personal list would look like, and your favorite giant monster moment out of the series. Until then, take care, my gathered friends.